Hello, Jamie Hill, and thank you for agreeing to this interview. I know that the MI Berry County Indivisible members are excited to hear from you, especially from our February meeting. So let's start off with your 2-minute elevator pitch, and then we can get right into the questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I've really enjoyed working with your group down there over the last year or so. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jamie Hill. I am running for Congress here in Michigan's second congressional district. And a little bit about me is, I'm a dirt road farm kid. I grew up in rural Michigan. I've always lived in rural Michigan, and I really, truly understand what the people of rural Michigan face on an average day. My parents were working class. I grew up in a trailer house on a small farm, trying to get by like everybody else was. And then after school, my first job were working construction. I started my own construction business and was remodeling until the 2008 housing crash, and that kind of took out my business along with so many other home remodeling businesses, especially in an already economically depressed area like where I was growing up. Along the way, post 9/11, I had gotten involved in emergency services. I started volunteering with our county search and rescue team to help them out. And then that kind of led my path into emergency medicine and emergency management. So I picked up my EMT and then my paramedic, and, kind of fell in love with EMS and worked as a fortunate backstop after the housing crash. I was able to transition into a full time EMS role, and then kind of keep the bills paid, and that really kind of sparked a love of the environment and really helping people. And through that, I became an instructor. I started teaching at the community college for the next generation of paramedics. I also became our instructor coordinator for the agency I worked at, handling all of our in-house training. And that was, I really learned so much about the healthcare system and how seeing the shortcomings that all the problems that our politicians leave in rural America, you know, our EMS agencies are kind of those people we get called when they don't know who else to call. And so we played, we were social workers, we were medical providers, we were providing resources. There's a lot of things that happen there, and you really start to feel about how many people are struggling in our society. But it also really taught me how to listen to people and actually understand what their problems are. And so I would have loved to stay in EMS probably the rest of my career, but my back had other ideas and started giving out because EMS is a young person's game. So I went back to school. I got my physician assistant from Yale School of Medicine. And I had originally planned to stay in my community, but during that time, as I transitioned to became an out non-binary person in the community, the local hospitals wouldn't even give me a call back to give me a job interview, even though I had worked with them for years. I did clinical rotations with them for years. So that's how I ended up here on the west side of the state. And I think it's a great example of how I've always wanted to stay in rural America. That's where I wanted to help. I could have gone anywhere in the country to any blue city in a blue state to provide care in a heartbeat, but that's not home for me. Local rural Michigan is home. So that's how I decided to stay, and now I'm over here. And my journey into this politics kind of started like a lot of people was with the I didn't get too involved in politics during the first Trump administration because I was going to school. That was kind of like when I was in PA school and you have no time to worry about anything else. But and working COVID during that was also so much fun. But you know, with this most recent presidency, I got involved supporting the protest movement, and I started the same way I always have. I grabbed my medical gear and I started showing up as a medic providing support for the protests. But I realized if we don't have people challenging the incumbents, the protests don't have any teeth to them because they just have to show up unopposed on the ballot. And after spending 20 some years complaining about the politicians we've gotten, and I went, you know what? I have the resume. I know how to talk to people. I think it's time we had somebody who actually understands how life goes in rural Michigan try to run and represent us. And here I am, and it's been a wild 14 months now so far, I think, since I started officially campaigning. So yeah, it's been an interesting adventure so far.
Very nice. Yeah, I personally definitely appreciate you throwing your hat in the ring. So, all right, let's get right into the questions. So I have like I said, a set of topics, some of them being government reform, gun violence, corporate PAC donations, etc. I'm going to try to go through each of the topics, and then we can always loop back to different questions that I have. So, starting right off with government reform. If elected, what actions would you take to hold accountable those officials of the administration who have acted in potentially unethical, illegal, or unconstitutional ways?
So with Congress, we have the power of the purse and we have the power to start impeachment investigations. Those are our two primary focuses that we would have. And I am a firm believer we need to start impeachment hearings on day one. I'm actually endorsed by the citizens impeachment effort because I signed on to their coalition to either sponsor or introduce impeachment articles of impeachment on day one. So there's several of us that are working our way towards Congress that have all signed on to that, and I think it's the most important thing we can do to restore our standing on the world stage and with the American people is to show that we are going to hold people accountable. And then with depending on our majorities and the numbers that we have, which right now things are looking pretty good, but politics you never know. It's as how far we can push that, but at the very least, using power of the purse to restrict funding for agencies that are causing problems, we can start to rein in what's going on. Coming from an emergency management background, when you're talking about disaster management, one of the first steps is to stop the threat, and that's what we need to be doing in Washington D.C. is rein it in, contain it, stop it from causing any more damage, and then we can start restoring order. But one of the most important things is that gets missed a lot is the last step of disaster, relief is preventing it from happening again. Rebuild systems that are stronger, more effective, and really dig in and see where are the holes in our current system that let this happen. Do we need to enact different reforms? And part of that, I think, is going to come from the American people on making sure that pressure stays on, because ultimately the American people are the ones who get to decide that government reform. If any politician that they elect in isn't doing what they said, primary them, run another one against them. Stop letting people be comfortable.
Yep. Yep. Very correct. Yes. Very true. Unfortunately, that's something that people need to remember.
Yeah.
Who holds the power and that they should need to put it to use. Um, okay, jumping topics to gun violence. Current gun safety laws are not working to reduce gun violence. What do you propose to keep our children safe in schools, in their home, and in their neighborhoods?
So this is where I tend to get unpopular with some of the further left. Um, right now, the Second Amendment is constitutional law. Like it or not, it's there. And if we're going to be the party that respects the Constitution as a whole, we have to respect the Constitution as a whole. We can't, you know, ignore the 19th Amendment and accept the Second Amendment like the Republicans are trying to do, and we can't reverse it and say the 19th Amendment is valid, but the second is not. So we have to work within that framework. And also in rural areas, you know, um, broad gun control is very, very unpopular that on both sides of the aisle in rural areas. So when we look at what's going on in America and we talk about America being an outlier in gun violence, and we 100% are, but we're also an outlier in healthcare, in socioeconomic status, in uh, for-profit prison systems, all of these other things that contribute to gun violence, and those are all things that there is bipartisan support to fix. So I think instead of wasting political capital trying to fight a gun ban that is it's going to be an uphill battle and constitutionally tenuous, let's focus on the things we can fix right now. I would gladly stand on Capitol Hill, and when the Republicans tell me it's all about mental health, go, then let's fund mental health. Put your money where your mouth is. We'll stop talking about gun control if you start funding mental health,
Mhm.
and push the issue hard that way and get it to, actually make progress where we can make progress. Then if we've fixed all of those other problems and we're still having a gun violence problem, okay, now we've eliminated all the other variables. And like it or not, we do have a process for changing the Constitution. It's been done many times. It could be done again. Um, One of the things I always say when we're talking about gun control laws is anytime you have a policy about gun control, replace the word gun with vote and see if you still like the sentence. Because constitutionally they're pretty much the same. So whether we like it or not, that's the legal standard it's being held to. So that's where let's fix all the other problems. Not saying and first of all, most of our gun laws right now are being very unfairly enforced or very ineffectively enforced and very much enforced harsher against minorities. And most gun control has a history in oppressing minorities. So there's a very complicated um, history we need to wrestle with there and have some really open and honest conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. No, fully agree. And I do like what you're saying. You got to get to the root. Unfortunately, gun violence is a symptom of other things. It's just that's what makes the headlines.
Yeah, it is, and it's I always kind of joke about you know gun violence or guns are the left's version of the right and trans folks. Is
Mhm.
most of them haven't actually met one, and they're both very afraid of what's going to happen in a bathroom if they get left alone. And it's very much tongue in cheek, and I can obviously make that joke where others can't, but it's an education issue on both sides,
Mhm.
and it's a reality of this is the world we live in. Let's work within what's obtainable. So
Yep. Yeah, very good points. Okay, yeah, moving to corporate PAC donations. What bill would you try to pass to try to address the issue with PAC and corporate donations, essentially buying candidates and current sitting leaders?
I have a lot of ideas on this, and this is again one of those depending on the voices we have at the table, and again, we have Citizens United, a constitutional, or the Supreme Court decision that makes it very, very difficult to get around that. Now, some states are working to work at that from the corporate law, state and corporation laws, which I fully support. I think we need to really kind of think more outside the box and like, why are campaign contributions so powerful? And the reason is we have essentially unlimited spending on campaigns. So I think a way we could obtain that better is limit the amount of spending allowed on a campaign. So therefore, that individual donation reduces the amount of value in the overall campaign. And it's when you sit here and talk and you hear numbers about it's an average of $1 million a campaign for a House district, and there's two candidates running, and we do this every 2 years. So we're $900 million spent every 2 years on campaigns. What a waste of resources. You don't need The only reason you need to spend that money is because the other guy is spending that much money. If we cap it at some sort of reasonable number, even extremely high, like $500,000 per campaign or $250,000 per, campaign or per election year, that's still more than enough money. And in a way, it would force representatives to get more involved in their district because they just can't buy a mass amount of advertising and let that do the work. They need to actually get out and talk to their people. So I think that's one of the big ones that we could look at. Now, passing legislation that would directly, remove corporate donations, that's an effort. I know there's a constitutional amendment effort going on to amend the Constitution to say that corporations aren't people, to make that very clear. That's a long shot one. I mean, it would require way more cooperation than we have at the moment, especially from the people who personally benefit from those corporate donations. So I think we're going to have to look outside the box on that way to somehow level the playing field. I personally would love to see federal elections limited to a shorter time span with some federal funding for them to make it easier for a candidate like myself who's trying to challenge the status quo to be on even footing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is one of those that would change so many other things about the election process for the good.
Yeah, no, definitely makes sense. And I like how you're coming at it from a different side, especially the federal funding level where it's because right now, if you don't have the money, there's essentially no chance, but why not get more voices out there?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's obviously the politicians in charge have a vested interest in not having anyone try to primary them or challenge them. And that's the issue, that we need to change that, because if you're doing your job should be safe.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not doing your job, you should have to fight to keep it. So,
Yep. Yep. Well, good points. Okay, jumping over to the topic of gerrymandering. This has been a huge issue this year. We've seen it all across the country. What is your position on national legislation requiring independent redistricting commissions in every state? Sort of like what we have here in Michigan.
100% support that. And I think that should absolutely be the case for federal, for congressional districts. Those should have to have an independent redistricting commission. And if you already have that redistricting commission for your, congressional races, hopefully that will incentivize states to also, since we already have the commission, let's do that for our, local state elections as well. So, yeah, that's an easy one. 100% support it. So
Nice. A quick follow-up to that one. As we know, this is kind of a weird midterm gerrymandering. So what do you think about a law that would require redistricting to only occur after the census? So every 10 years instead.
that also, I think we again would level the playing field out and make that this is just how it happens. End of story. Um, well, I don't mind the blue states doing it to prove the point that this is how easy this gets carried away, where we're going to be redistricting every election to just kind of prove the insanity of it. And most of them have done it with a sunset provision where it will automatically go back. But yeah, we need to stop it. We've everyone's proven their point. Now it's time to eliminate the problem from both from a if you have independent redistricting committees, it really shouldn't matter
Mhm.
that you're redistricting in the middle and then basically requiring it to only be that every 10 years. This is I know some of the other candidates that I'm in a group with that had their districts switched mid campaign. It's like this is just insane. So
Yeah, in some cases, essentially starting over from where your base support is from. It's crazy.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, moving to voter protections. What is your position on this so-called SAVE Act legislation? It was proposed in the federal. It is being proposed in the state. Just from my personal understanding of it, it would increase the proof of identity burden, especially for married women.
So the Save Act is a problem in search of a solution, or a solution in search of a problem. Like it's a problem. But it's making up an issue. It really is all about, um, restricting access to the polls for people the party in power doesn't like, because it's so broadly written that basically you could restrict just about anybody if they wanted to, and at least it would add a burden to make it not worth it. Ultimately, it's a poll tax if you're going to require people to have a passport or all these forms of identification. And it's a non-issue. There aren't non-citizens voting, not in a number that makes a difference. And the fact that we hear about cases where it gets caught means the system is working. You know, the fact that we hear about these rare cases means the system's working as directed. And ultimately, states have power over their elections. You know, Michigan has extremely safe election procedures. My wife is a poll worker and an election administrator, and this is a soapbox she will climb up on and talk about. And you know, there are so many checks and balances in the system that it's damn near impossible, and it's certainly not widespread. And you know, one of the things I always say, anybody who like questions the security of the polls, go volunteer to be a poll worker, see it for yourself, then come back and talk. But as far as all the other, you know, hoops they're trying to make people jump through, no, they're unnecessary. I mean, let's follow the evidence, and we don't have unsecure elections, so we don't need to enact changes that are going to be difficult for people. That's just all it is. We should be making it easier for people to access the polls, not harder.
Yep, fully agree. Okay, jumping over to healthcare. Healthcare costs continue to spiral while at the same time healthcare is inaccessible to a large number of Americans. How do you propose reforming our healthcare system?
This is the one where I get to talk for a long time. So, so, uh, I've seen it from both sides. I have from multiple sides. You know, as a paramedic, where we're often the last resort for people who don't know what else to do, or they're going to the ER because they have had zero access for care. That was why I went back to PA schools. I wanted to be able to intercept those people before they ended up calling an ambulance and going to the ER, because so many of them didn't need to, but there just wasn't providers to go to. And then I've fought with insurance companies. I have tried to get care. You know, I've had things denied. I don't think there's anybody in America who hasn't, who's not a billionaire, who can just buy their way out of any problem. So the solution is single payer healthcare. There is no other solution, whether it's single payer healthcare, you call it Medicaid for all or Medicare for all, whatever term you're using for it. Now, that's not the same as socialized medicine. Everyone can keep their doctors, or doctors can keep working for who they're working for. It's just, instead of having your insurance company preventing you from getting care and sucking money out of the system, you have one government run insurance agency providing care. And the true fraud, waste, and abuse in the healthcare system is all the profit that gets taken out. That's where we get screwed as patients and providers. Your providers hate the American healthcare system just as much as you do. They're just as frustrated with it. Every hurdle you have getting healthcare, your provider deals with those same hurdles for every patient. And that's what's burning people out and making them want to get out of healthcare. So, and getting healthcare for everyone in America is the like positive generational change that comes along once in a lifetime. Every problem we have in rural America could get better with individual single payer healthcare system. If you know, the number one cause of bankruptcy in America is medical debt. The only, you know, advanced country in the world that's even a thing. So we can stop that from happening. Your local businesses can now compete on wages and the fact that their jobs are just around the corner, instead of you driving to the city for a job you probably don't like for crappy health insurance because it's the best you can find. So now you can work closer to home. Your local businesses can thrive. When you're working closer to home, you're spending more money in your local community. You're putting less miles and wear and tear on your vehicles, which is better for the environment. Childcare becomes less of an issue because if you're not working for insurance, one parent might be able to stay home now, or so many more people would be able to open their own daycare if they didn't have to worry about having insurance for themselves.
Mhm.
So that starts to get improved. Drug and alcohol abuse starts to get reduced. That's going to take a lot of years for that to happen, but so much drug and alcohol abuse starts as self-medication for mental health problems. If you can provide that mental health care, provide addiction, recovery services, you can start to break that cycle. That breaks the cycle of people who aren't working, who are receiving other government assistance, because now they're getting treatment and they can work. Your farm communities don't need to have one spouse working an off-farm job just for insurance. Their kids have a chance to come and work and keep the farm alive because they have insurance. They don't have to try to get an off-farm job just to pay for their kids health insurance. And it just keeps trickling down. That gun violence problem that we talk about, that starts to improve because if we have better mental health care, people aren't feeling desperate. They don't turn to gun violence or violence in general. And you will end up with more access to healthcare in the rural communities. There's not a shortage of providers who want to live in rural America. There's a shortage of providers that can afford to do it. Because the problem is right now in America, for a provider like myself to open my own practice, I have to cover my own health insurance. I have to cover my front desk person's health insurance. I have to cover my MA's health insurance. Then I either have to hire a company or, on average, 3 people to bill insurance companies. It takes 3 people per provider to bill for insurance. And that's to hope you get paid. So every time, every year when you have to switch insurance companies or look through the plans, your healthcare providers are doing that for every insurance company they work with to see if it's worth keeping that insurance policy and accepting insurance. That's why in the spring, all of a sudden, you're like, yeah, we don't take that insurance anymore because they just changed it to where they're not paying enough to be worth it. So if I can come open a practice where I can look at what the government pays per service and go, yeah, I can see this many people, this many people, this many people. I can make this practice run and I submit. I know I'm going to get paid for it. I can open my own practice. You want to see your local hospitals and local doctors' offices get away from giant corporate healthcare? That's how it happens. Because the reason they're working for the giant corporate healthcare system is because they have the compliance and the billing departments that they can afford to absorb that cost in and combine it where the small hospitals and doctors' offices can't afford to do it. So it fixes so many problems down the line. But you get to like, that's a really big project. And, if we've learned anything, Americans don't like being told what to do about their health care. So how do we make it happen? And this is where there's a lot of ideas out there. There's a lot of different theories on it. I look at it from a triage perspective, and we need to recover or provide care to as many people as fast as possible. So, step one is restore the ACA subsidies because there's a system in place. We can make that happen. That gets people back on health insurance and keeps them from being sick. Then we can expand Medicare or Medicaid to basically force the rest of the states to offer the extended Medicaid, but provide funding for it. So this federal government starts to take over a little bit of that cost from the states because right now Medicaid doesn't pay that well because there's just not enough money to go around, which is why you run into problems where some providers won't accept it. So we can fix that as the federal government. We can make it so everybody is willing to accept Medicaid and the people who have it get great care. Then simultaneously with that, we need to expand the VA. The VA, veterans deserve the absolute best healthcare system in the world, period. End of story. We spend trillions to go to war. We can pay to take care of the veterans when they come back. And the only thing standing in the way of the federal government making the VA the best healthcare system in the world is the federal government. It's fully federal system. They can make the problems go away. And then do the same thing for TRICARE, which is the military, active military and families insurance. That should be the best healthcare system in the world as well, or best health insurance. Make it happen. Again, federal government's the only thing standing in the way. So once we have that, we can start expanding the Indian Health Service because we also owe them. That's another fully federal healthcare system that should be up there as a premier one in the world. Once we have this all going, we can combine Medicaid, Medicare, and TRICARE into a single health administration agency to save expenses. Now we've got our government funded healthcare system. We start adding people to it. We include children, and as children age out to 18, they get to stay on it. As people hit age 65, when they would have normally gone on Medicare, they get on it. We close that gap from both ends. But
Hmm.
ultimately, what we need to do is make that insurance so good that everybody in America goes, damn, I want on that insurance, and prove that we can do it. I mean, I think the biggest problem most people have with single payer healthcare system is they see how the government screws up programs. Rightfully so. Like I've had that same opinion before of like, I don't know. So we need to prove that we can run a good healthcare system, and doing that stepwise fashion allows people to buy in, allows us to make the transition because we're only going to get one shot at this. And if we shove a half thought plan out, there's going to be people trying to make it fail. And if it fails, we're going to have a really hard time selling it again. So by rolling it out slowly, that allows us to, transition people who work in insurance companies now from a role where they're denying care to move them to a role where they're helping provide care. You will probably not need as many people working in the insurance industry or insurance billing. Transition them off to social work positions, offer retraining for that, so we don't take a huge hit to the economy in the process. Hey, we can make it work. I think it's going to take a couple years to make it happen, but it can happen. So
Very
that
nice.
was
Yeah,
my
good.
favorite topic to talk about.
Good. I'm glad that I asked that question. I know we're almost out of time here, but just because it's on everybody's mind, I wanted to quickly ask you about the war in Iran. There's been a lot going on. It changes day to day. So just a quick, super general question. What's your current position? Would you, if given the opportunity, would you be a part of the groups calling for the War Powers resolution? And maybe a quick follow-up to that, how do we take back power? Because it seems like we've had war powers resolutions, nothing happens. So what can we do to try to get some of that power back?
So first of all, the war in Iran is a stupid thing that we should have never been in. Just period. End of story. Um, you know, we got drug into this war for whatever reason by whoever was involved. That's going to be graduate student dissertations for years. Parsing that all out. But the fact is, we don't need to be there doing what we're doing. And at best, we can hope to get back to where we were before it started. Like literally, best case scenario is get back to where we were, December of last year,
Mhm.
which is crazy, that we've spent. And, you know, the best way to take care of our veterans is not make more war veterans. Like let's not waste America's youth and treasure on pointless wars. So we need to get out of there as quick as we can. Unfortunately, we made the mess. We are going to have to help rebuild it, even though I know it's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people, but we're going to have to. We're going to have to help fix it, which hopefully, maybe in the long run, can show the goodwill of the average American citizen to the Iranian people and the people of the greater Arab world, because we've spent my entire adult life messing around in the Middle East and not getting anywhere. So when do we call it quits? When do we say this enough is enough? As far as like on the war power side of things, this is where we the people need to hold people accountable. If your representatives aren't voting to rein it in, get rid of them. Replace them with someone who will. And we also need to change a lot of the post 9/11 laws to further restrict the president's ability to, you know, wage essentially war without congressional approval. And we really need to have Congress stand firm. And when they come to ask for more money to continue their operations, we have to say no. I've heard rumblings from various, corporate Dems that are very much like, well, we can't not fund the military. We're in this problem. And it's like, no, we can stop and only fund defense operations and be like, no, you get no money for offensive operations. It's just like your kid throwing a temper tantrum at the dinner table. If you cave and let them have dessert, they're going to do it again.
Mhm.
And honestly, I think a lot of dealing with this administration is stuff you learned when your kids were 2 and 3 and dealing with temper tantrums. And it's literally what's happening. And we kind of need, if they're going to act that way, we need to treat them that way and be like, no, just be the parent, which is Congress's job, to be the parent of the executive branch and hold them accountable. And that's where Congress isn't doing their job. So we, the people, need to elect people who will, and let them know that this isn't an optional item. Congress could fix this anytime they wanted to. It's not rocket science. We need 4 or 5 Republicans to and a handful of Democrats to actually, stand up for the right thing. But if you have to have donors or an opinion poll to tell you whose lives are worth savings, you don't deserve to be in leadership. Just end of story. So,
Yep. Yep. Great points. Okay. Yeah, I think we're at end of time. So if you want to give another quick 2 minute, maybe a shout out to your website, I can make sure that I link that when we post this video. But yeah, closing remarks are all yours.
all right. So, social media is elect Jamie Hill. That gets you to pretty much everything. Website, Facebook, TikTok, I think is just elect Jamie, but Instagram. So those are all the ways you can find us. We're out hitting as many events as we can in the community. So kind of keep track of our Facebook page to see where we're at. And I am running a very lean grassroots campaign. We are 100% volunteer. No one's getting paid. I'm not taking any giant corporate donor checks. I'm also not taking any money from the CEOs of those same corporations, because lots of candidates will say, I'm not taking any corporate PAC money. But when you go look at their FEC filings, they're taking money from the CEO of that same company. It's the same money. It
Mhm.
really is. So it's just getting shuffled around. So we also have been having a lot of conversations about electability, and I'm going to call it what it is. It's usually around is a euphemism for, am I too queer to win in this district? And I want people to really think and look about at the races Democrats have been winning so far in the last year. It's been the more progressive, outside the box candidate who's willing to challenge the status quo. I'm running for Congress as an openly queer person in a very, very red district. I don't know how much more status quo challenging I can pull off. But I'm from here. I'm from rural Michigan. I understand. I'm here fighting for you when I don't have to be. So I think that's something else to really pay attention to, is what's the motivation of our people who are running for office. I don't want to be a career politician. I want to be able to come home and work and live in this community after I serve in Congress and not have to dive down aisles in the grocery store every time I see someone. So that's my take on it. My big thing I've been telling people is, if we want corporate money out of politics, we have to put our money into politics. It's the only way we can, until we can get enough people elected. That's what we need to do. So if everybody who voted Democrat in this district last election donated $10 to me, that's $1.3 million for a campaign. Then I don't need corporate money, and corporate money can't compete with that. Because if you've got $10 in, you're vested, you're interested, and money doesn't vote.
Mm.
So don't sit here and worry about who you think everybody else is willing to vote for. Vote for the candidate you want. Vote for the candidate you think is going to represent you the best. Because we've been seeing in these elections, like out of New York and stuff, that the candidate, the people who think like the best is the one who everyone else actually likes too. So you're not an outlier. So, and then the other aspect of to it is make sure you're involved. Talk to your friends. There's not enough swing voters in this district to win it blue. There's just not enough of them. And most of them are going to vote Democratic anyway because gas at $5 a gallon. They don't care who's on the ballot. They don't know. They're not that involved in politics to actually pay much attention. It's going to be those young, disenfranchised voters that I'm reaching. So get the word out to them. Don't try to sell them on, a political party. Sell them on a candidate. So next time you hear someone complaining about their health care, which is pretty much every day, tell them about me. Tell them how I'm working to fix it. And then, kind of let the process roll from there. So, and I guess that's about it. So,
You brought up donations real quick. Do you have an Act Blue or a website that we
yes,
can go to?
you can get to us from Act Blue, from our website. There's links there. Or you can mail checks to Citizens for Jamie Hill at P.O. Box 72, Fremont 49412.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to get that up on the screen during the actual release of this video. So, okay, Jamie Hill, thank you very much.
Alrighty, thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.
Yep, you too.
Bye.